the case of Brett Ryan. Brett grew up in a prosperous and large Canadian family. His parents, Bill and Susan, had 4 sons. Brett's parents tried to teach him through their own actions. His father held a prestigious job at the Toronto Star daily newspaper and had various hobbies like sports, yoga, and psychology. Likewise, Susan was very hardworking. Their entire household rested on her shoulders. She not only devoted time to her husband and children, but also managed the huge house in Toronto's prestigious area without any help from gardeners or craftsmen. Just like his older brothers, Brett went to university after high school. He always aimed to be better than his siblings, so he advertised painting services in a local newspaper for Toronto residents' houses and fences. Initially, things went well. He made his first earnings and Susan was proud of him, often using him as an example for others. However, making money as a part-time job is one thing. Dropping out of university to spend all your time inhaling paint fumes without proper education is another matter altogether. After some time in university, Brett decided to drop out. For the first couple of years after this decision, Brett still felt confident compared to his older brothers. After a while, when Christopher and Leland graduated and found jobs in their fields, Brett's authority began to wane. Christopher started working for the City of Toronto Transit Commission and Leland became the family artist and designer. Following their studies, they moved out of their parents' home. Brett, to avoid spending part of his earnings on rent, stayed with his father, mother, and younger brother who attended a school for gifted children. With each passing year, Brett grew more desperate due to his mounting debts and his inability to pay them off. He developed depression. By 2007, when Brett was already 26 years old, his debt had ballooned past $60,000. Although Brett was considered an intelligent individual, he did not know how to effectively use his mind. He always put on a cheerful face and helped everyone around him. He was a participant in volunteer initiatives. Consequently, no one could fathom the depth of despair within him. Eventually, a fateful moment arrived when nothing could be done. On October 28, 2007, Brett had no work orders for house painting or any other tasks around the house. Orders were always scarce in the fall, since everyone typically painted their houses in spring or summer. With winter approaching and no prospects for earnings, there was no time to wait. Brett donned all the old clothes he had in his closet, a hat, a long sweater from his older brother, and a scarf knitted by his mother. This particular scarf was comically long. Brett hadn't worn it before, but now found it useful. He wrapped it around his face, leaving only a narrow slit for his eyes, and headed for the bank, located on the outskirts of his neighborhood. Clutching a thick folder, Brett waited for his turn at the bank. When an employee finally summoned him, he approached her and quietly informed her that he had a gun with him. He instructed her to take all the money out of the bank's cash register and give it to him. The girl, shaken with trembling hands, handed him all the cash from the register. Brett then quietly exited the building to avoid drawing the attention of the guards. Once outside, he ran. Upon counting the stolen money, he realized it amounted to just over $1,000. This sum was far from sufficient to clear his debts. He calculated that robbing about 60 banks would be necessary to meet his financial obligations. Despite how improbable that seemed, he saw no alternative. In the initial days following the robbery, Brett was consumed with fear that the police might track him down. To avoid detection, he refrained from going home and informed his mother that he had a job in a neighboring town. Instead, he spent nights in his car cautiously approaching his house periodically to check if any police cars were hidden nearby. Each visit confirmed silence and no signs of pursuit. This reassured Brett that his plan was working. The success of the first robbery led to more, a second, a third, and a fourth. Each time, Brett took precautions to change his appearance by wearing different clothes, purchased secondhand or even retrieved from trash, and burning them afterward. He also invested in a fake beard from a costume store, since bank employees always mentioned his beard in their testimonies. News outlets in Toronto began covering stories about the bearded robber, but despite this notoriety, he never managed to gain substantial amounts through these crimes, the most being just $3,000 per robbery. Brett hit a snag when police identified his vehicle on surveillance cameras and traced it back to his residence. Lacking solid evidence for an arrest, law enforcement decided simply to monitor him closely. For about 15 days following this new development, Brett refrained from further robberies, even though no more than 3 or 4 days typically passed between crimes before this. His unusual hiatus led some officers to believe they were tailing an innocent person and wasting resources on a dead end. But then fortune turned in favor of law enforcement. Brett left the house, got into a car, and later exited not far from the bank. Wearing a different and unusual outfit, he entered the branch and remained there for some time. Upon leaving, he was immediately apprehended by the police, who announced that the much-discussed bearded robber had finally been caught. Brett had been under investigation for 7 months and was charged with armed robbery. Interestingly, despite having a gun permit, the bearded robber always entered the bank unarmed. He did not even carry a kitchen knife. In total, he faced 19 charges and was subsequently imprisoned. Brett and his family filed multiple appeals, which led to only 8 of the 19 counts being upheld. However, Brett didn't stop there. At the first opportunity to apply for parole, he submitted a petition. In it, he requested consideration of his severe depression caused by 2 failed relationships and substantial debt. Additionally, he emphasized that he committed these crimes without intending to harm anyone and without carrying any weapons. His remarks were taken into account. However, to secure early release from prison, he had to undergo sessions with a psychologist. These sessions had a positive impact on Brett's behavior and mindset while incarcerated. During this period, he did not communicate with his family but eventually took steps to mend those relationships. The positive changes in Brett were recognized by the commissioners overseeing his case. Consequently, on November 24, 2010, Brett was released from prison. Nonetheless, this hard-won freedom turned out to be more challenging than anticipated. Before becoming known as Brett the Bank Robber, he was simply a painter burdened with personal struggles. Post-incarceration life proved difficult. Few companies were willing to hire an ex-convict with such a tainted background. Even when hired for house painting services, clients would cancel upon recognizing him as the infamous bearded robber. The social repercussions extended to his family as well. Neighbors who once praised Susan's garden began spreading unpleasant rumors about them. The Ryan family decided to sell their house hastily and move to Scarborough, where Susan started cultivating her new garden afresh. Despite these challenges, Brett managed to find employment at a trading company. However, his salary was modest. His parents also assisted financially in helping him rebuild his life and continue his university education. Brett continued to see a psychologist. Each session, the specialist advised him not to sever ties with his family. The psychologist's advice proved effective. However, Brett's financial situation remained precarious. Then, in September 2011, a significant positive event occurred in his life. He met Kristen Baxter. Kristen was an exceptional girl. She owned an apartment with windows that offered a stunning view of the sea, which provided the young couple with a picturesque landscape to enjoy. She was also athletic, maintaining excellent physical condition. Crucially, she was unconcerned about Brett's past. As a couple, they traveled periodically and had even visited Australia. Brett's parents were delighted to observe his relationship with Kristen flourish. They were confident that Kristen would encourage him to advance in life and secure his place in society. Life seemed to improve for Brett until his father passed away. This loss profoundly affected him and triggered a return of depressive symptoms. Consequently, he had to increase his visits to the psychologist and spend time supporting his mother, both emotionally and financially, despite his limited resources. Realizing that their relationship needed to advance beyond casual dating, given their maturity, Brett decided to make a commitment to Kristen. He had saved some money and discussed his intentions with his mother. He expressed his desire to propose to Kristen, the goal being a memorable proposal she couldn't refuse. Understanding her son's intention, Susan provided additional funds for him to purchase an engagement ring. Notably, the couple had previously discussed their future together, and it was clear that Kristen did not require an extravagant gift or similar symbols of commitment. Brett's proposal to Kristen meant the world to her, signaling his serious intentions. Despite this, he decided to go the extra mile and purchased a gold ring adorned with a sizable diamond for his beloved. Naturally, Kristen accepted his proposal. From there, they began planning their wedding. Brett, agreeing with all of Kristen's decisions, nodded in approval. However, the rising costs and financial implications unsettled him. He started worrying about his career prospects and financial stability. Determined to secure a stable job, Brett found an engineering position at a prominent tech company online. He meticulously prepared his resume and applied for the job. To his delight, he was invited for an interview and subsequently received a job offer. Elated by the news, Brett shared it with Kristen and his mother. Eager to make a good impression at his new job, he asked his mother for money to purchase an expensive suit. As always, she didn't refuse him. Yet, just when everything seemed perfect, Brett received a disappointing call from the company. Their security team had uncovered details of his criminal past, leading them to rescind their offer. This news hit Brett hard. It was like a bolt from the blue. His spirits dropped immediately. Frustration set in as he considered the futility of ongoing interviews, each ending in rejection due to his past. Faced with repeated setbacks, Brett decided that rather than continuing with futile efforts and investing time in studies that seemed pointless due to his tarnished record, he would use the funds allocated for university studies on their wedding instead. Brett thus found himself back where he had recently escaped from, but kept certain truths hidden from loved ones, including dropping out of university and being rejected from the engineering role. He maintained appearances by dressing in professional attire each morning before heading to paint houses, changing clothes en route. To further sustain this facade among friends and family, Brett frequently updated his social media profiles with pictures seemingly originating from an office environment or business events, images sourced off the internet, and would even pretend he was resolving urgent work-related matters during family gatherings by faking phone calls regarding work issues. In September 2016, after a 5-year relationship with Kristen, Brett sought to plan a wedding. He demonstrated a remarkable ability to conceal his true situation, successfully creating the illusion of a stable life. Despite being a common painter, he projected an image of success and prosperity. He agreed to rent an expensive restaurant requiring $100 per guest. The entire Ryan family was thrilled seeing Brett's apparent transformation: a prestigious job, a fancy apartment, and an attractive bride. However, the truth of Brett's deceit was far more complex. With the wedding just a month away, Brett needed funds for the event. He repeatedly borrowed money from his mother until she could no longer assist him financially. Desperate, he even demanded that she seek higher-paying employment. Planning his party for August, he invited all his friends and brothers. As the pressure mounted, he confided in his counselor about his deceptions. He had been lying to his family for a year about working as an engineer at a technology company. The psychologist expressed deep disappointment and advised Brett to come clean to his mother. Though reluctant, Brett eventually told his mother the truth. Her devastation was profound. She had spent years boasting about her wonderful son. She insisted that Brett also confess everything to Kristen, or she would do it herself. His brothers were already aware of the lies and supported their mother's stance. Unable to face telling Kristen the truth himself, a shocking task after barely managing to reveal it to his mother, Brett found himself in an untenable position as the wedding approached. He knew that informing Kristen would prevent the ceremony and considered if honesty might have been better. Facing pressure from all sides, Brett still couldn't admit the truth to Kristen and feared his mother might do so before long. Each time Kristen's phone rang, he tensed up until realizing it was not her discovering the secret, but rather another friend discussing wedding plans. Desperate for resolution and unable to handle the mounting stress any longer, he needed a final solution. He was forbidden to use firearms, so the boy decided that the best way to carry out his plan was to use a crossbow. Besides, it's quite a silent murder weapon. One of his late father's hobbies was bow shooting at targets. He taught Brett how to. Yes, Brett was good at target shooting, though it was unlikely his late father thought his son would use that skill in such a manner. Brett bought a crossbow and arrows at a sporting goods store and hid it behind the construction debris lying in Susan's garage. At home, he arranged what he thought was an ingenious alibi invention. He tied a spoon to a fan and set the fan on a timer. When the timer went off, the fan turned on and the spoon moved across the computer keyboard, sending pre-prepared comments to YouTube. From an outsider's perspective, it must have seemed like Brett had spent all day at home watching videos and commenting on them. On the morning of August 25th, Brett, dressed in strange clothes that hid his face, left the house through the back door to avoid security cameras, and took a train to his parents' house. His aim was to eliminate anyone who might disrupt his and Kristen's well-being once and for all. Susan was very surprised at her son's unexpected arrival. She had not been feeling well that day, but Brett, despite his mother's condition, began once again to persuade her, and even demand, that she not tell his future wife anything. The mother categorically refused him. Then Brett began to get angry. Susan sensed something wrong seeing her son's mad eyes, and warned him that she had already called Christopher, and he was on his way. Brett went berserk. He ran to the garage to get the crossbow, but found that his anger and adrenaline overflowed him with such force that he couldn't even make a shot. Instead, he bludgeoned his mother with the butt of the gun, and finally ensured she was dead by tightening a rope around her neck. After throwing plastic bags over the body, Brett loaded the crossbow with arrows and hid in the bushes, waiting for his brother to arrive. After a while, Christopher arrived and started calling for their mother or brother, but received no response. Only an arrow shot from behind which pierced his neck, causing him to die within minutes. The next victim was Alexander, their youngest brother. As it turns out, Susan had managed to call him too before everything happened. He was also shot in the neck, but either the arrow did not penetrate deeply or it missed vital arteries. Thus, Alexander did not die immediately, but began to scream and call for help. During this time, Leland was in the house, sleeping in his room on the second floor. He had no idea of the carnage occurring in the garage and garden, much less that his own brother was committing the crime. Leland's sleep was disturbed by a scream. Coming downstairs, he saw Brett trying to strangle Alexander. A fight broke out between Leland and Brett. As soon as Leland gained the upper hand and managed to push Brett aside, he ran to the neighbors and called the police. Brett stayed in the house. He had nowhere to run. He realized this was the moment he had completely ruined his life. With nothing else to do, he took out his phone and wrote Kristen a letter asking her to forgive him. When the police arrived at the crime scene, they saw a bloody Brett sitting next to his equally bloody, but still alive brother Alexander, who would later die in the hospital. Brett himself asked the policeman to handcuff him and take him to the station where he confessed everything. Brett also informed them that his mother's body was hidden under packages in the garage, but it was impossible to help her. At both the police station and later at trial, Brett admitted that he did not intend to kill Susan. His plan was merely to scare her. However, he did plan to kill Christopher and Alexander that day since they were witnesses, and if they hadn't arrived, they would still be alive. Almost 10 years ago, he tried justifying everything with his depressive state, but it did not soften his sentence. Despite acknowledging that Brett confessed everything on his own accord and did not hinder the investigation in any way, the judge sentenced him to 3 life terms, 1 for each murder, with parole eligibility in 2041. As for Leland, he is not speaking to reporters but is known throughout Toronto as the sole survivor of that dreadful incident. On June 15, 2023, Chad Dorman returned home early from work and requested that his 3 sons and wife join him in the primary bedroom for a nap. Sometime after they lay down on the bed, Dorman opened his gun safe and retrieved a rifle. Dorman then shot Hunter twice, killing him. His wife began trying to help Hunter while telling the other 2 sons to run. At this point, the stepdaughter, who was watching television, was entering the bedroom and witnessed the first shots. She ran after Clayton, telling him to keep running. Dorman chased him into a nearby field, shot him from behind, and then point blank in the head. The suspect carried Clayton's body back to the house's yard. The stepdaughter then re-entered the house, picked up Chase, and escaped to the road. Dorman followed her and aimed the rifle at her, telling her to put Chase down. He tried to fire but was out of ammunition. Chase ran to his mother, who was now outside in the yard trying to render aid to Clayton. The stepdaughter got away and informed a passerby what her stepfather was doing before continuing to run towards the nearby Monroe Township Fire Department. Dorman then went inside and carried Hunter's body outside, laying him in the yard. He then tried to wrestle Chase from his wife, reportedly biting her in the process. When she managed to grab the rifle, Dorman fired, shooting his wife in the thumb. She dropped Chase, whom Dorman then shot in the head. Dorman then laid Chase's body down next to his brother's and sat on the side stoop of the house, watching his wife try to resuscitate the boys until police arrived at 4:25 p.m. Chad Dorman was born in 1990 in Ohio, USA, and was the cherished only child of Kit and Gloria Dorman. From the start, he was the apple of their eye. Chad had what you'd call a normal childhood. His family was middle class, so he managed to get through elementary and high school without any major issues. He wasn't exactly a standout student, but he got by, passing his classes and staying out of trouble. However, things took a turn once Chad hit adulthood. He started drinking heavily and driving recklessly, which led to numerous traffic tickets and fines. At one point, he even crashed his car and fled the scene, ignoring multiple court summons. The real wake-up call came in 2010 when Chad was accused of domestic violence against his own father. Despite the charges, his father refused to testify against him, not wanting to see his son in trouble, so the case was dismissed. But history repeated itself, as Chad faced another domestic violence accusation, this time from a partner. Like before, the case went nowhere because no one would support the charges, holding on to hope that Chad would change. And change he did, at least for a while after meeting Laura. He fell head over heels for her. Unfazed by her having a daughter, Alexis, from a previous marriage, they soon started a life together, moving to a residential neighborhood in Monroe, Claremont County. The family grew with the arrival of 3 sons, Clayton, Hunter, and Chase. By early 2023, Chad was 32, Laura was 34, Alexis was 16, and the boys were 7, 4, and 3 years old, respectively. The Dormans settled nicely into their peaceful community. In their free time, Clayton and Hunter loved playing baseball. Their coach really liked them and always talked about how energetic and happy they were during practice. He described Hunter as a natural prankster and Clayton as the more serious one, always focused on getting the plays right and cheering on the team. Though both boys shared a love for sports, their other interests varied. Clayton enjoyed building with Lego, riding his go-kart, playing with his dog, and especially taking care of his younger brothers. Hunter, the more adventurous one, was often found playing in the yard, splashing in the creek, or bouncing on the trampoline, always showing lots of affection. Every day, he would tell his mom and sister how much he loved them. Even though Chase was very young, he had already shown a vivid imagination, spending most of his day pretending to be a superhero. The rest of the time, he was glued to Laura, sharing a special bond. The community often spoke of how close the Dorman family was, amazed by their strong connection and shared moments. Yet, behind closed doors, things were quite different. Neighbors frequently heard Chad yelling at Laura and the kids, with hardly a day passing without some outburst. Close friends noticed the situation deteriorating, describing Chad as a ticking time bomb. The abuse escalated to the point where Laura threatened to leave. Despite the turmoil at home, Chad tried to keep up appearances publicly. In June 2023, he updated his Facebook profile picture to one featuring the 3 kids and followed up with more posts, including one from the baseball field where Clayton, Hunter, and Chase gave thumbs up, suggesting all was well. At the time, the photo raised no alarms and seemed to depict a happy family scene. Those aware of Chad's abusive behavior chose not to intervene, hoping the family situation was improving. On Wednesday, the 14th of the month, the kids had a baseball game. Chad, Laura, and Chase came to support them. After the game, the head of New Richmond Sports Association noticed Chad interacting with the kids, instructing them to get into their car seats, seemingly caring and responsible, which left no suspicion about his true nature. Unbeknownst to everyone, that would be the last time the children were seen alive. The next day, Chad came home early from work and asked his wife and children to join him in the master bedroom for a nap. While the rest of the family was sleeping in the master bedroom, Chad's 16-year-old stepdaughter was watching television in the family room. Once they were all asleep, Chad opened his nightstand drawer, revealing a safe from which he retrieved a rifle. He woke the 3 children and lined them up with Hunter in front. What followed was a horrifying tragedy. Dorman shot Hunter twice, killing him. Laura was awakened by the noise and started screaming in horror. She rushed to Hunter's side and urged her other 2 sons to run. Meanwhile, Alexis, in the next room watching TV, heard the gunshots and ran into the bedroom. She saw her stepfather chasing Clayton and started running after them. The boy raced to a nearby field, but despite his speed, Chad caught up with him, treating it like a hunt. He then shot the boy as he ran, causing him to fall and allowing more time to shoot him again at close range. He then carried the lifeless body back to the house. After witnessing this, Alexis rushed inside to grab Chase, hoping to save him. Her plan was to head for the nearest road, but they never made it out of the house because Chad caught up again. He told Alexis to put down Chase, but she refused. Chad tried to shoot, but the gun clicked, empty of bullets. Just then, Laura appeared in the yard, trying desperately to revive Clayton but to no avail. Alexis put Chase down, telling him to run to their mother, saying she would go for help. The little boy ran to Laura's arms for safety. Meanwhile, Chad went back inside to reload his gun and came back to grab his son Hunter. After leaving Hunter in the yard, he tried to snatch Chase from Laura. They struggled, and Chad bit Laura's hand before shooting her in the same spot. She dropped Chase and Chad took him. He then shot the boy in the head. Satisfied with his actions, Chad placed Chase beside his brothers and sat on the side porch, sinisterly watching as his wife tried in vain to revive the children. It was 4:14 p.m. when Laura realized there was nothing more she could do. She called the police, hysterically screaming that she had lost her babies. The father had fired 9 shots. One boy was shot once and the other 2 were each shot 4 times. Meanwhile, Alexis was running towards the Monroe fire station, screaming for help. A neighbor driving by stopped to ask what had happened. Alexis told her that her stepfather had killed everyone at home. The neighbor offered to take her in the car, but Alexis refused, saying she couldn't leave her family behind and continued running towards the fire station. The neighbor parked and called the police, recounting Alexis' story. When asked if she could check on the house, she said she didn't want to get close, fearing she might be shot too. By this time, 911 operators had received 2 calls about the incident and had alerted the officers who rushed to the Dorman residence. The neighbors, having heard the shots, were in their yards trying to see what had happened, unaware of the full extent of the tragedy. At 4:30 p.m., the police arrived at the scene. They found Chad calmly sitting on a step outside, rifle in hand, soberly stating he wasn't going to resist arrest and admitting to the crimes, insisting they take him to jail. In this gripping footage from the police body camera, we witness the moment law enforcement apprehends Chad Dorman. The scene unfolds with palpable tension as officers approach, capturing the crucial interaction that led to his arrest. Despite the calm exterior he presents, the gravity of the situation is evident. While Chad was detained, the immediate focus shifted to the 3 children who were found lying in the yard with gunshot wounds. Paramedics tried to perform CPR, but to no avail. Within minutes, the tragic deaths of the children were confirmed. Attention then turned to Laura, who had a gunshot wound to her hand, not life-threatening. She was rushed to the University of Cincinnati Medical Center, screaming at Chad that he had destroyed her life as she was loaded into the ambulance. Chad was arrested smoothly, but as he was about to be placed in the patrol car, he bizarrely warned the arresting officers about the family dog and told the pet to go back inside the house. The property was cordoned off with yellow tape as officers planned to return the next day for a thorough investigation. That night, Chad was charged with 3 counts of aggravated murder. When investigators returned to the house the next morning, they found no signs of forced entry, indicating Chad acted alone. In his initial statement, Chad chillingly admitted to having planned the attack on his children since the previous October and revealed he hadn't slept for 3 days leading up to the crime, tormented by the thought of killing his children. On June 16th, Chad made his first court appearance, wearing a padded green vest designed to prevent self-harm, flanked by 6 deputies, indicating concerns he might become unruly. During the hearing, he admitted to lining up his 3 children before killing them. Neighbors' testimonies were presented, with one witnessing Clayton's attempt to escape from Chad. The evidence overwhelmingly pointed to Chad's guilt. His defense requested a $75,000 bail, arguing his long-standing relationship with Laura, lack of stable employment, and community ties made him a low-flight risk. However, prosecutors demanded a $20 million bail, a record-high amount in Ohio, effectively ensuring Chad could not be released. The judge agreed with the prosecution. The criminal division of the Claremont County Prosecutor's Office expressed that this was the worst crime he had encountered, condemning Chad's betrayal of his children's trust and need for protection, love, and guidance. He highlighted the brutality of Chad's actions, particularly when he hunted down Clayton. He also criticized the community for ignoring Chad's violent tendencies. The hearing concluded with Chad facing 9 counts of aggravated murder, 1 for each shot fired at his children, plus 8 counts of kidnapping and 4 counts of assault. He was remanded to Claremont County Jail as the investigation continued. On June 23rd, a grand jury indicted Chad on 21 counts, stirring outrage when he pleaded not guilty. Claremont County's prosecutor mentioned that the aggravated murder charges could lead to the death penalty. He argued for the elimination of bail, claiming no sum could match the atrocity of the crime. The case had already garnered extensive media attention, with crowds outside the courthouse demanding swift justice and calling for severe punishment for Chad. Public opinion varied after the hearing. Some agreed with the prosecutor's stance on the death penalty, while others advocated for life imprisonment, insisting Chad fully face the consequences of his actions. However, the consensus was clear. Chad deserved severe punishment. Despite the nationwide backlash, Chad's father still supported him, expressing shock and sorrow in an interview, attempting to rationalize his son's actions as a sudden madness, contradicting Chad's admission of premeditated planning. In contrast, Laura and her family grappled with the fallout. Alexis needed psychological support due to the trauma, and Rachel, the children's aunt, initiated a GoFundMe campaign to cover funeral expenses. She expressed that while the trial might convict Chad, it wouldn't mend their broken hearts, leaving them only memories of the joyful children they once had. On June 25th, the New Richmond Sports Association held a vigil at the baseball field, selling t-shirts to aid Laura's family. Community members visited the Dorman home, leaving toys, candles, and flowers in tribute to the children. A service was held on June 26th at the First Baptist Church for the kids. Laura asked everyone to wear bright, colorful clothes to remember her sons happily. But even with the cheerful colors, you could feel the deep sadness, especially with their friends who just couldn't make sense of the terrible event. During the service, the coach spoke, emphasizing the irreplaceable time spent with the boys and cherishing every moment shared with them. On September 22nd, a pre-trial hearing for Chad was held, setting the trial date for July 8, 2024, expected to last until August 12th of the same year. It was decided that Chad would remain in custody at the Claremont County Jail with his bail set at $20 million. To this day, the motive behind the crime remains a mystery. No one knows what truly drove Chad to kill his 3 children. Some media suggest he might have been seeking revenge against Laura, who planned to leave him due to his violent behavior towards her and the children. However, Chad has not addressed this theory and continues to withhold cooperation with the investigation. In February 2024, during a court session, Chad Dorman's lawyers requested the judge to dismiss the statements Chad made during his questioning due to certain legal problems and violations. The judge agreed and decided not to consider the confessions Chad made to the police, where he admitted to killing his 3 sons. The judge believed that Chad's rights were not respected after he was arrested. On October 1, 1993, 12-year-old Polly Klaas invited 2 friends for a sleepover of her. The evening proceeded smoothly until Polly's mother, Eva, was abruptly awoken by intense screaming. She soon discovered that her daughter had been kidnapped by an unknown assailant. Hannah Klaas was born on January 3, 1981, in Fairfax, California. Her family comprised her father Mark, her mother, Eva, and her younger sister, Annie. When she was very young, her parents separated. Following the separation, Polly and her sister went to live with their mother in Petaluma. Mark subsequently entered a new relationship, and Polly developed a positive relationship with his partner. This arrangement created a harmonious family dynamic, where Polly spent time with both parents without any issues. Polly is often described as a quiet and innocent child. Although she had friends, she was generally shy. However, she found confidence in theater. Polly participated actively in school plays and various musicals organized by her community. Frequently cast in lead roles, her primary aspiration was to become a successful actress in musical theater. Furthermore, Polly had a fondness for sleepovers. She enjoyed having friends over and visiting friends' homes for such gatherings, a regular activity within her social circle. On October 1st of that year, when she asked Eva if two friends, Jillian and Kate, could come over for a sleepover, her mother readily agreed. That afternoon, the friends arrived at Polly's house and spent the evening there quite contentedly initially. At around 9:45 p.m., Eva decided to go to bed due to a severe headache. Informing the girls of this decision and asking them not to hesitate waking her if necessary, she took 2 sleeping pills and fell into deep sleep shortly thereafter. It was past 11 p.m. when Eva was startled awake by the screams of her daughter's friends. Both girls informed her that a man had broken into the house and taken Polly. Eva immediately contacted the police and checked on her other, Annie, who appeared unaware of the commotion. When authorities arrived, they began questioning Polly's friends. The girls described that they had been in a room engaged in activities like picking Halloween costumes and indulging in general playful behavior. At approximately 11 p.m., Polly suggested it was bedtime, and her friends agreed. She mentioned fetching an inflatable bed she prepared with her mom so they could all sleep together. Upon opening the bedroom door, they were confronted by a man brandishing a knife. The man did not conceal his face with a mask. Initially, due to the proximity to Halloween, the girls mistook this for a prank and laughed. Realizing it wasn't a joke, they became frightened as the man grew angry at their laughter. He forced them into another room and tied their hands and feet. Inquiring who resided in the house, they all identified Polly as the inhabitant. The intruder then removed pillowcases from nearby pillows, placed them over Jillian and Kate's heads, instructing them to count to 1,000. He assured them he was taking Polly for a brief period, but would bring her back soon. After determining that their captor had left, Jillian and Kate attempted to free themselves. This effort lasted around 30 minutes. Once free, they rushed to inform Eva about Polly's abduction. They relayed this entire sequence to the police and provided a detailed description of the suspect, since he didn't hide his face. This enabled officers to create a sketch of the individual. For a media investigation, evidence at Polly's residence was sparse. Footprints noted were from Polly, her family, and recent visitors only. However, fibers found on the carpet differed significantly from those within Polly's home. These fibers were later identified as originating from automotive carpeting material. Police examined vehicles associated with individuals known to be at the house recently, yet found no match with these fibers, leading them to conclude that they belonged to the kidnapper's vehicle. A palm print was also discovered, but couldn't be thoroughly analyzed due to technological limitations at that time. This detailed account provided critical insight for law enforcement's pursuit of justice in identifying and apprehending Polly's abductor. Back in 1993, advancements in fingerprinting, DNA analysis, and other forensic techniques were not what they are today. As a result, the found palm print with any database was not feasible at that time. However, the print was preserved for future comparisons with potential suspects. In Polly's room, another piece of evidence, a fabric that seemed to be silk, was discovered. It looked like it had been cut scissors from a garment and had a distinctive pattern's gait. Police believed this could aid them in future investigations. Additionally, a hair belonging to an unknown individual was found. Although DNA analysis techniques existed then, they were not yet developed enough to be effectively utilized. The search for Polly became one of the largest searches conducted in the United States up to that point. Around 4,000 volunteers joined the efforts, combing through neighborhoods near her home, vacant lots, and larger estates in the vicinity. Police attempted to identify drivers who resembled a sketch of the suspect, but were unsuccessful. Officers aimed to find Polly within 24 hours of her disappearance because finding her alive would become increasingly difficult after that period. The FBI was involved to assist with the investigation, launching their efforts to locate her as quickly as possible. Despite their best efforts, days went by and hope of finding Polly alive started to wane. Police questioned neighbors about any unusual activity on the night Polly was abducted. Several neighbors reported seeing an odd man wandering around the area, but they did not suspect he would kidnap someone from a neighbor's house and thus did not alert emergency services. When police shared a sketch, based on descriptions from Polly's friends with these neighbors, they all confirmed having seen the man. Officers also spoke with all the teachers and staff at Polly's school. They aimed to find out if anyone knew the man, or had any information regarding Polly's disappearance. Alas, no one had any knowledge and everyone had an alibi for the relevant time period. None of the school staff matched either the sketch or the description provided. The police even compared fibers found in Polly's house with car mats from teachers' staff members' cars, but none were a match. As days turned into weeks, the desperation of Polly's family, authorities, and the public increased. There was a growing fear that the man who kidnapped Polly posed a significant threat to society. This added more pressure on the police to resolve the case swiftly. A reward of $200,000 was offered for information leading to Polly's whereabouts, sponsored by actress Winona Ryder, who held a press conference urging for Polly's safe return. The Polly Klaas case had another peculiarity. In 1993, internet use wasn't widespread, nor utilized by law enforcement for search operations or information dissemination. However, 3 California residents took it upon themselves to leverage this new technology for the search effort. They posted pictures of Polly, sketches of her kidnapper, and reward details online. Their efforts eventually reached an estimated 25 million people in the U.S. via various internet forums and communication channels. While the FBI hoped this would be pivotal in their investigation, it didn't yield significant leads. Despite heightened publicity and numerous tips, investigators lacked solid leads. Weeks elapsed since Polly's kidnapping. Frustration grew among investigators as they were unable to identify the kidnapper or obtain a DNA match from evidence collected. This sense of helplessness persisted until receiving an unexpected phone call. A turning point that held promise quickly evaporated into uncertainty. Mark Klaas received a call from someone claiming to be his daughter, Polly. The girl stated she was at a hotel and that her captor had just stepped out briefly, giving her a chance to reach out. Unfortunately, the call was abruptly cut short before any additional details could be gathered. Mark promptly went to the police to inform them about the situation. At that time, the FBI lacked advanced tools to trace previously made calls. Consequently, they waited for another call, hoping to trace it. A few hours later, a second call came in from the same girl who had first spoken to Mark. After receiving this call, the police traced it and were surprised when it led them not to a hotel, but to a residential neighborhood. When officers arrived at the identified house, they knocked and soon discovered it was a prank. A teenage girl, similar in age to Polly, lived there, hence the voice resemblance. She explained her friends had dared her. Rather than taking her to the police station, they asked her parents to monitor her activities and cautioned her against making jokes about such serious matters. On November 28, 1993, nearly 2 months after Polly's disappearance, a woman called the police reporting 3 suspicious objects on a large piece of land she owned. The police and FBI who arrived on site found critical items related to the investigation. A piece of silk matching one from Polly's room, valet ties missing since that night, as mentioned by Eva, and duct tape. This discovery led police to speculate that Polly might be in the vicinity. Further investigation revealed new information. On the day of Polly's disappearance, this same woman had reported strangers frequently trespassing on her extensive wooded property with only a small house and no perimeter fence. The lack of barriers and signage meant many inadvertently wandered onto her land without realizing it was private property. The woman had numerous intruders, but one incident, in particular, stood out. On the night Polly was abducted, a man approached her house in his automobile. His car became stuck in the mud. The nanny, who was caring for the woman's son, first saw the man, but refrained from confronting him due to fear. The homeowner also chose not to approach him, noting an angry expression in his eyes. They then contacted the police. When the officers arrived, they questioned the man about his presence on the property. He stated he was unaware it was private property and expressed willingness to leave quickly, but requested assistance freeing his car from the mud. The officers observed that the man appeared very nervous and scared. He was sweating and seemed possibly drugged. At that time, they lacked the means to conduct a drug test, and since he wasn't being overtly aggressive, they had no grounds for arrest. Consequently, they aided him in extricating his car from the mud, and he eventually drove away. This individual's name was Richard Allen Davis. Richard Allen Davis was born in 1954 in San Francisco, California. His childhood was fraught with violence inflicted by his parents. When Richard was 12 years old, his parents separated. His mother completely disowned him and left him with his father. Richard's father proved to be highly irresponsible, often leaving him alone for extended periods. Sometimes Richard stayed with neighbors or relatives when alone at home became untenable. By his teenage years, Richard started engaging in criminal activities. Stealing things and getting into street fights frequently led to reform school stints. At 17 years old came a significant turning point in Richard's life. He committed a violent robbery that nearly resulted in severe injury to his victim. Faced with two options by the court, reform school or joining the U.S. Army, Richard opted for military service, but lasted less than 2 years before receiving a dishonorable discharge due to continued misconduct and poor behavior. As Richard matured, he continued to encounter problems, and his criminal record grew significantly longer. Around the age of 20, he received a 15 sentence for robbery and kidnapping. Despite this, he served only 1 year of the sentence due to parole for good behavior. At that period, Richard was also troubled by another accusation. Many friends believed that he had been involved in the disappearance, a 19-year-old girl named Marlene. Although the police concluded that she had left voluntarily, her close friends were convinced Richard had a role in her disappearance after they attended a party together. These accusations remained unproven and were largely based on rumors. When Polly disappeared, Richard was on probation and did not have a specific address. In response, the police issued a special bulletin exclusively for officers, urging them to exercise extreme caution. They withheld information from the media to prevent Richard from potentially fleeing California or even leaving the country. Ultimately, on November 13, 1993, Richard was arrested while driving under the influence of alcohol, following a routine traffic stop by an officer. He failed a breathalyzer test. Upon inspection of his identity and photograph, the officer quickly realized that this was the individual linked to the Polly Klaas kidnapping case. Proceeding with care, the officer informed Richard that he was being arrested for violating his probation due to drunk driving. Without resistance, Richard agreed and was taken into custody. Once at the police station, officers read him his rights and disclosed that he was actually being detained for Polly Klaas kidnapping. During an extensive interrogation session, Richard eventually admitted to abducting Polly. The police speculated that his confession might have been made under duress. Evidence collected included his palm print, which matched one found at Polly's house perfectly. Carpet fibers from Polly's house were identical to those in his car's carpet as well. Polly's friends were brought in for questioning at the police station, where they unequivocally identified Richard as her abductor, stripling closure to their distressful ordeal. Another piece of silk, identical to the one found in the girl's room, was also discovered in his car, and on the property of the woman who had contacted the police. Everything was against him, so he finally decided to confess. He mentioned that he had been using illegal substances with friends that day and was not feeling well. He made the decision to break into a house in a certain neighborhood to commit a burglary. Richard drove around for some time before arriving in Polly's neighborhood. He noticed an open window in a house and decided to climb in. According to him, he did not plan anything, never saw Polly, never saw her family, nor followed them. Once inside the house, he looked for valuables, but found few items of interest. Just as he was about to leave, Polly opened the bedroom door and saw him. Richard observed that Polly appeared very frightened, so he ultimately decided to take her with him. He stated that he put Polly in his car, began driving, and after a while stopped at a vacant lot. He violated Polly. Following this incident, he resumed driving. When the woman and babysitter saw Richard on private property, Polly was still in the back seat of his car. When police officers helped him pull his vehicle out of the mud, Polly was still alive. This caused much frustration among law enforcement personnel who believed her life could have been saved. Afterwards, Richard said he drove down the highway where he strangled Polly, dug a grave and left her body there. On December 4th, 1993, Richard informed police about the precise location of the grave where they began their search efforts. 2 months and 3 days after her kidnapping, Polly Klaas' body was located on the side of a highway in a grave dug by Richard himself. Forensic examination revealed little additional information. It confirmed that strangulation was indeed the cause of death, as stated by Richard. Further details could not be determined with precision. However, it is understood that her death occurred roughly around the time she disappeared. Given all the evidence, the man was put on trial for kidnapping, murder, and rape of Polly Klaas. During the trial, Richard had a chance to speak. He not only apologized to the family, but also made a serious accusation against Polly's father, claiming he abused her. Richard stated that she said to him, "Don't do to me what my father does to me." This caused Polly's father to yell and almost stand up to hit him, though he was restrained by others. The defendant's words shocked everyone present, not just because of his accusation and lack of genuine apology, but also because no one believed Polly's father had done such things. Although it wasn't proven, Polly's former partner even defended him. On June 18, 1996, Richard was found guilty of Polly Klaas's kidnapping and murder. In August of that year, he received a death sentence. He attempted to challenge this sentence but failed. Then in 2006, after overdosing on pills in his cell, he was found unconscious but revived and sent back to prison. In 2009, his lawyer tried appealing his conviction to the Supreme Court but was unsuccessful. The Supreme Court confirmed that he should be executed. Richard's attorney mentioned plans for further appeals. As a result of these continued appeals, Richard has remained on death row for several years without being executed. There is hope that once all appeals are exhausted within the next few years, the execution will proceed as planned. Jessica Camilleri, a woman from Sydney, Australia, decapitated her mother in a tragic incident on the night of July 20th, 2019. Having faced humiliation at school due to her apparent cognitive delays and learning difficulties, Jessica retreated into resentment. She developed aggressive behaviors when feeling threatened or when she thought she was being mistreated, which could range from a stranger's glance to her mother's refusal to give her extra food. Her paranoia grew, fueled by an obsession with horror movies like the 1974 Texas Chainsaw Massacre. This film, known for its intense violence, was banned in several countries, including Australia and the UK. It's about a group of young people in Texas being chased by chainsaw-wielding cannibals. On that fateful Saturday night, Jessica used 7 kitchen knives to stab her mother in the skull, decapitate her, and then threw her head into a neighbor's yard. After the act, she shockingly asked the police if a doctor could sew her mother's head back on to bring her back to life. Jessica Camilleri was the second daughter of Rita and Vince, an Australian Maltese couple. Unlike her older sister, Christy, Jessica was born with a mental disability. While the average person's IQ ranges between 90 and 110, Jessica's was between 55 and 60, placing her in the bottom 1% and categorizing her mental delay as mild. People with mild intellectual disability often learn to speak, read, write, and do math later than others, but they can still communicate and express themselves in daily life. Jessica was late in reaching developmental milestones like walking, talking, and coordinating movements. Due to her condition, she was enrolled in school much later than her peers, facing early on the discomfort, teasing, and bullying from classmates for being different. Jessica dealt with the resulting stress and anxiety through anger, particularly towards females, and developed intermittent explosive disorder. This condition is marked by sudden repeated outbursts of impulsive, aggressive, and violent behavior, as well as angry verbal eruptions that are grossly out of proportion to the situation. Intermittent explosive disorder usually appears by the age of 6 and intensifies during adolescence and early adulthood. It's not just a normal tantrum, but a mental disorder linked to a lack of serotonin, the mood, regulating hormone in the brain. School. Jessica lashed out at students and teachers alike, once biting a male student and refusing to let go, leading to her indefinite suspension and confinement at home under her mother Rita's care, supported by a disability pension. Besides intellectual disability and irrational bursts of fury, Jessica also suffered from attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or ADHD, a chronic brain condition that affects millions of children worldwide and makes it hard to control her behavior. She was also diagnosed with severe bipolar disorder, depression, and anxiety. Furthermore, Jessica had autism spectrum disorders, affecting her judgment, awareness of thoughts, feelings, and empathy towards others. Autism made simple daily activities like shopping, using public transport, banking, and working difficult for her. Jessica had obsessions such as with her 3 favorite numbers, 2, 3, and 5, which she associated with her favorite colors, yellow, green, and purple, respectively. She liked to repeat these numbers to create random phone numbers to dial, often trying to talk to men. Once, she called a family's home in Bangladesh, India, up to 100 times a day, just because she liked their phone number. In 2018, she began harassing the staff of a meat company in Daylesford, England, even threatening the company owner, Matthew Layfield's family, claiming she would decapitate them with a chainsaw. Jessica's fascination with horror movies was another unchecked obsession. She spent hours, days, months, and years rewatching gruesome videos, especially fixated on films like Saw, Jeepers Creepers, and her favorite, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre from 1974, about young people in Texas chased by chainsaw-wielding cannibals. This movie was banned in several countries, including Australia and the UK, for its violence. When her mother, Rita, restricted her from these films, Jessica would become furious with her. Jessica and her mother Rita lived alone in a house in St. Clair, a suburb of Sydney in New South Wales, Australia. Vince, Jessica's father, divorced Rita during Jessica's teenage years because of the continuous behavioral problems of their daughter. The marriage couldn't withstand Jessica's outbursts, leading to its downfall. Despite Jessica's low self-esteem and her childish and naive personality, she exhibited strong narcissistic traits. Deep down, she believed she was unique and deserved special treatment because of her mental disability, which sometimes made her exploitative and egocentric. Rita, however, was unwavering in her care. She knew her daughter had issues, but felt it was her duty to look after and protect her. Rita even reached out to apologize to one of the victims of Jessica's harassing phone calls, admitting she was at her wit's end and unsure how to control her daughter. Although Jessica loved her family, she was especially close to her mother, who catered to all her needs and chose to keep her at home instead of placing her in a psychiatric facility for full-time care. Rita's life revolved around Jessica. According to the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare, 1 in 5 Australians, or 20% of the population, approximately 4.8 million people, reported having a mental or behavioral condition between July 2017 and June 2018. Women reported a higher proportion of mental or behavioral conditions than men, and young people aged 15 to 24 had the highest proportion of mental or behavioral conditions. Mental illness refers to a clinically diagnosable disorder that affects a person's cognitive, emotional, or social abilities. It encompasses a range of conditions, including depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, and psychotic disorders. These conditions significantly impact an individual's emotions and how they interact with their community, affecting not only the individuals themselves, but also their families and caregivers. The tragic event of July 20th, 2019 was not an isolated incident. 6 years before the calamity struck the Camilleri family, Jessica had been convicted on a couple of occasions for common assaults, causing actual bodily harm. She had also previously attacked an aunt and her sister's mother-in-law by pulling their hair. However, she was never jailed. Instead, she was always left in the care of the one person who could tolerate her, her mother, Rita. Jessica had also been aggressive towards women in the streets and shopping centers who she perceived as looking at her wrongly or making her feel ashamed. She was once barred from a doctor's office after becoming paranoid and violent towards another patient in the waiting room. In early 2018, during a visit to the hospital with Rita, Jessica attacked a nurse. Jessica was admitted to a mental health unit for 9 days due to a severe mood disorder episode and was treated with lithium for supposed bipolar disorder, along with antipsychotic medications. By the end of 2018, about 6 months before the crime, Jessica had stopped taking her medication and started using natural remedies to manage her conditions. Rita was so desperate that she paid $2,500 to a medium on Queen Street in St. Mary's, a western suburb of Sydney, hoping to exorcise the demon she believed was inside Jessica. Rita's family and friends repeatedly warned her about the dangers of living with Jessica, but Rita insisted her daughter wouldn't harm a fly. Christy, Jessica's older sister, described their mother Rita as having a heart of gold, always putting others before herself, including Jessica, who repeatedly refused professional help. Rita's sister also recognized Rita's unconditional love for Jessica and often expressed concern that Jessica might harm her. However, Rita's motherly love blinded her to these warnings, ignoring them even the day before the fatal attack when she had to take Jessica to a police station because her daughter had made threatening calls to strangers again. On July 20th, 2019, Jessica felt humiliated by her mother in front of a man who merely walked past them in a parking lot. After visiting her sister, the two women returned home. Jessica asked her mother to order another round of food from Red Rooster, but Rita refused. Jessica then called the restaurant herself 3 times at 9:18 to 9:20, and finally at 9:21 p.m. Jessica also asked her mother to call a doctor to come to their house. Rita complied, but the doctor fled the home, terrified by Jessica's behavior, which chased him until he managed to escape in his car. Rita, out of patience and options, told Jessica she would call the emergency number and request an ambulance to take her immediately to the mental health care system. Jessica's worst episode of rage was about to unfold. That night of July 20th, 2019, 57-year-old Rita was dragged by her hair to the kitchen of her own home by Jessica. Using 7 meat cleavers, 4 of which broke, Jessica stabbed her mother over 100 times in the head and neck. This act of mutilation was driven by more than uncontrollable anger. It reflected Jessica's macabre curiosity, influenced by her obsession with the horror films she watched daily. The forensic pathologist's autopsy revealed that Rita had suffered monumental injuries to her head and neck and died from multiple stab wounds with decapitation at the second vertebra in her upper neck. Rita's body also had over 90 defensive wounds, indicating she was conscious for a significant part of the attack, experiencing extreme physical pain and emotional terror from what her daughter, whom she had devotedly cared for, was doing. During this gruesome scene, Jessica's nephew, the 4-year-old son of her older sister, Christy, was present. He had been under Rita's care for a few days due to Jessica's seeming improvement. The boy witnessed Jessica stabbing his grandmother multiple times and decapitating her. When he tried to intervene, Jessica, whom he called the little bastard, slightly injured him in the head. The young boy started vomiting upon witnessing the horrific scene. After killing her mother, Jessica called the emergency number from Rita's cell phone and confessed to murdering her mother, claiming self-defense, alleging that Rita had attacked her first. Jessica felt she had to act fast and began repeatedly stabbing her mother. After decapitating and stabbing her mother over 100 times, Jessica dumped the head in a nearby neighbor's front yard. When the police arrived at the house in St. Clair, Sydney, New South Wales, Jessica was outside, her clothes stained with Rita's blood, holding a water bottle. She showed no remorse for her actions, only worrying about what would happen to her next. Jessica asked the police officers and later the detectives at the crime scene if it was possible to bring someone back to life who had been decapitated, believing in the possibility of medical miracles that could reattach her mother's head. A police officer responded that this idea was rather unrealistic. Yet Jessica insisted, thinking that doctors could perform miraculous surgeries and reattach her mother's head. She also inquired if she would face any consequences, like the death penalty for killing her mother. When told that Australia does not have capital punishment, Jessica felt relieved. She also confessed to the police that the idea of decapitating her mother came from the horror movies she watched compulsively. This chilling conversation was recorded on the body camera of a police officer. When he arrived at the scene at 11:43 p.m. on July 20th, 2019, first responders described the scene as one of the most horrific they had ever encountered. The day after the crime, on July 21st, 2019, Jessica appeared at the court but did not apply for bail. A friend told the media that this was not surprising, as Jessica likely did not understand what bail meant. After a trial highlighting her long history of mental illness, Jessica was found guilty of manslaughter in December 2020, having pleaded not guilty to murder due to disability. In early 2021, she was sentenced to a maximum of 21 years and 7 months in prison with a non-parole period of 16 years and 2 months, making her eligible for parole on September 19, 2035. The prosecutor told the court that Rita's gruesome murder was the peak of a lifetime of escalating violence from Jessica, progressing from hair pulling to a deadly explosive attack. He also argued that Jessica was assessed as a moderate to high risk of reoffending and remained a continuous danger to the community. Christy, Jessica's older sister, stated that Jessica had killed and butchered their mother, and that she could never forgive her for her actions. Rita's sister hoped that Jessica would receive the necessary help and that Rita could rest in peace, knowing Jessica was cared for by a system that had failed her in life. The case judge offered counseling services to the jury members, acknowledging that the distressing evidence they had heard could stay with them long after the trial. The judge acknowledged that during the jury selection process, many individuals refused to participate in a trial like Jessica's. She also stated that Rita's murder was one of the most severe cases of homicide a court could encounter. She described it as a crime of extraordinary cruelty and brutality, exacerbated by its occurrence in the victim's own home. Jessica's lawyer mentioned that his client had expressed remorse in a letter sent to her family after the crime. In the letter, Jessica admitted that Rita had not hit her and acknowledged that it was her fault that her mother was no longer alive. However, one of the psychiatrists who evaluated her noted that Jessica did not use social gestures to communicate and displayed a rather mild lack of emotion on her face. The psychiatrist also found no signs of schizophrenia or auditory or visual hallucinations in Jessica. The conclusion reached was that Jessica's risk factors could only be managed over the long term with a comprehensive mental health support plan. Jessica was placed in the most stringent unit of the women's section at the correctional complex. Since entering prison, Jessica has continued to cause trouble. On September 9, 2019, just 2 months after her arrival, she threw a teacup at another inmate following a disagreement over food trading. The next day, she was charged with assault at the local court, but received no additional punishment. On October 14, 2019, she attacked another inmate, resulting in 5 days of solitary confinement in her cell. On November 3, 2019, she disobeyed an order, and on July 31, 2020, she damaged property, incurring a fine of $200 Australian. Another assault on November 21, 2020 led to 7 days in solitary. And in January 2021, she was convicted of common assault again without any further sanction. Jessica has defended her actions, stating that no matter what she does or where she goes, other prisoners will make her life miserable. She also mentioned that prison life is tough and not like the outside world. Mental health issues are prevalent among prisoners. According to the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare, 40% of Australian prisoners had a diagnosed mental illness in 2018. Furthermore, statistics show that 1 in 5 people with mental illnesses will interact with the criminal justice system at some point in their lives. While there is no direct causal link between having a mental health condition and committing a crime, These figures indicate that many individuals in Australian prisons had pre-existing mental health conditions. Research shows that people with mental illnesses are more likely to commit crimes, particularly those with psychotic disorders, as such episodes can lead to criminal behavior. Symptoms of bipolar disorder can be directly related to criminal acts, and extreme anxiety or stress can increase the likelihood of violent behavior due to heightened anger, agitation, or impulsivity. However, there's another side to this. The prison environment can worsen pre-existing mental health conditions with violence and brutality from other inmates or prison staff, potentially triggering or exacerbating mental health issues. According to the Australia Policy Development Centre, a prison is a dreadful place for someone with a mental illness. In Sydney Supreme Court on May 15, 2023, Justice Peter Hamill dismissed claims that Camilleri's sentence was manifestly excessive and that the sentencing judge had been incorrect in assessing the gravity of the crime. Justice Hamill nonetheless ruled that Camilleri should be resentenced, with support from Justices Christine Adamson and Richard Kavanagh. He considered that her behavior of walking into the street with her mother's head and dropping it, as well as asking emergency services personnel whether they could reattach it, demonstrated the extent to which her conduct was divorced from the real world. Based on the evidence of multiple psychiatrists and a psychologist, Justice Hamill found Camilleri had only a simple understanding of moral wrongfulness due to her intellectual disability and autism spectrum disorder. He ordered that she be resentenced to a prison term of 16 years with a non-parole period of 12 years. The case of Liga Scromane. India is the only country in the world where cultural and religious traditions have not been interrupted since ancient times, which is probably why it attracts tourists from all over the planet. But in our story, we will look at India like a coin that has a different image on each side. On April 20th, 2018, at dawn, two young men went fishing down the river toward a mangrove forest. They took a long boat ride downstream until they reached a remote and quiet place. One of them jumped into the water to tie up the boat, but his attention was distracted by a pungent, acrid odor that was very close by. They went ashore and followed the odor. Curiosity led them to a horrifying find. There was something that looked like a human body hanging on a tree branch and a skull lying nearby. The guys abandoned the boat and rushed to the nearest village to report the terrible find. A team of investigators, forensic experts, and police officers urgently arrived on the spot. The experts confirmed that the suspended body was indeed human. It was obvious that it had been hanging for a long time and had already begun to decompose. The flesh on the arms and legs had torn off and the skull was found nearby. Next to the body were packs of cigarettes, packaged drinking water, and a lighter which probably belonged to the victim. An investigation was conducted at the scene the same morning. The evidence found was seized, and the remains were sent for examination. The modest remnants of clothing that could be identified on the victim revealed that Liga Scromane, a 33-year-old hiker, was the victim of an accident. But who is Liga Scromane, and what happened to her on the riverbank? Liga Scromane was born in Latvia in 1986. She grew up in a large and friendly family, had an older brother and a younger sister. The sisters were very friendly and from childhood shared all joys and hardships with each other. Growing up, Liga moved to Ireland but always maintained close relations with her family. It was in Ireland that she met Andrew Jordan. It was not love at first sight, as the modest Liga had difficulty in communicating with new people. But after 5 years, Liga and Andrew turned into a married couple who made great plans for the future. Despite the fact that Liga worked in a hotel and led a modest lifestyle, she dreamed of opening her own center of yogic retreats in Portugal. Andrew supported his beloved's idea, and together they saved money for 4 years to fulfill their dream. But fate had other plans. In early 2018, Liga was experiencing the effects of an aggravated skin disease that was causing physical and mental discomfort. To help her sister overcome this ailment and restore her emotional state, her sister Ilza invited Liga on a trip. So in February 2018, Liga and Ilza traveled to Tiruvananthapuram, the capital of Kerala, so that Liga could receive Ayurvedic treatment for depression. Kovalam is the premier Ayurvedic resort of Kerala in India. Kovalam, which means grove of coconut palms in Hindi, is a small village offering everything you need for a comfortable and complete rest and treatment. Ayurveda is the oldest system of medical knowledge, which originated more than 5,000 years ago. Ayurveda is based on the universal laws of nature, on the unity of all things in this world. Ayurvedic programs help a person to restore balance and harmony in the body. Panchakarma is the best Ayurvedic program for modern man in Kerala. Panchakarma helps to reboot the body effectively. Most of those who have undergone the Panchakarma course in Kerala repeat it annually, and it is not without reason, as regular Panchakarma not only allows us to get rid of extra pounds, but also adds a couple of decades of healthy life. Since 1985, Ayurveda has been recognized by the World Health Organization as the most effective system of alternative medicine in the world. Let us emphasize that all the promised benefits of Ayurveda are only an alternative, not a panacea for healthy longevity. The 33-year-old Liga and her sister came to Kerala in search of spiritual enlightenment, hoping to be cured of depression in one of the Ayurveda centers. Their treatment tour was scheduled for 6 weeks and included yoga classes, meditation, therapeutic herbal drinks, and nutritional and massage recommendations. The sisters were treated together at an Ayurvedic clinic at Kovalam in Kerala and have already completed their course. On the morning of March 14th, Liga refused to go to yoga class with her sister, explaining that she had a headache. When Isla returned to her room, Liga was not there. With the help of the hotel staff, Liga was able to find out that her sister left the hotel around 11:30 a.m., wearing leggings and a yoga t-shirt, hired an auto rickshaw, and went to Kovalam Beach for a walk. The beaches around Kovalam are popular destinations for both domestic and international travelers. The sandy beaches of Kovalam are always crowded. However, Liga could not be found there. Liga wandered the beach until late at night, showing her sister's picture, but never heard the long-awaited response that someone had seen her. This was actually strange, as Liga was a tall white girl who definitely stood out, and if she was actually on the beach, someone should have seen her. After searching unsuccessfully, Isla went to the police station to report her sister missing. However, the Indian police officers did not show any sympathy for the missing foreign tourist. On the contrary, they complacently asserted that they would surely find the girl who had strayed, or that she would surely return the next day. They were not even deterred by the fact that Liga, according to her sister, had psychological problems and could be an easy target for criminals. The police registered a case, but the investigation started coldly, or rather, it is more correct to say, did not start at all. Liga had traveled extensively in Kerala, visiting Kollam, Vakala, and finally came to Kovalam. She considered herself a very experienced traveler in India, and this time she took her sister with her to show her the India she loved so much. But the trip turned tragic. After a few days of inaction by the Indian police, Liga started searching on her own. She enlisted the help of friends, and also reported Liga missing to her husband, Andrew, who flew urgently to India. The police investigation intensified after the missing person's husband, Andrew Jordan, and Liga contacted the local press and started an online campaign to find her. Liga also reached out via Twitter to India's Foreign Minister, Sushma Swaraj. Has been missing for 8 days. We are very worried, she wrote. The desperate sister announced a reward of 100,000 rupees to anyone who could help find Liga or provide any information about her movements that day. Liga and her friend Alexa, who had also traveled to India after hearing about Liga's disappearance, put up posters in the Kovalam beach area where Liga was last seen. Together, they put up flyers and distributed them to people. Numerous locals took an active part in the search for the missing tourist. The important fact remained that Liga suffered from depression and had a hard time interacting with strangers. On the day of her disappearance, she hired an auto rickshaw to reach the beach and was never seen again. She had about 8,000 rupees with her, but no passport, so she could not leave the country. Ashok Kumar, head of the local police station, said that the police had no leads in the case. The police kept saying that the tourist had gone on a bender or eloped and would soon return on her own. However, regular, persistent requests for help from Liga and Andrew forced the police to search for Liga. The search operation was conducted in the Kovalam beach area where Liga Scromane was last seen. Police assumed that she had drowned just as the unidentified body of a woman was found washed ashore at Kachal, in Kanyakumari district, Investigators examined the body along with the missing woman's sister, but the latter did not identify it as her sister. The version of drowning was not confirmed, and the search for Liga continued. Andrew, on the other hand, was convinced that his wife had been kidnapped by local gangs for the purpose of selling her. He tried to infiltrate these gangs to get more information, but was exposed and warned that repeated contact with the gangs would result in him having to leave the country. A month after Liga went missing, there were still no leads to help find the girl. Liga continued to look for her sister. She visited Kovalam Beach every day and watched people. On one such day, she spotted a boat and she had a theory. The only way to leave the beach unnoticed was by boat. On April 17, 2018, after a forced hiatus, Andrew returned to India to continue his search. Liga and Andrew entered a new struggle to find Liga Scromane, but her body was still not found. The search was complicated by the fact that Liga was a tourist and a citizen of another country. The Latvian Foreign Ministry said the embassy was in constant contact with Liga's relatives and was also working closely with the Indian police. The Latvian embassy also appealed to the Indian Foreign Ministry with a request for special support in the search for Liga, as well as the Honorary Consul of Latvia in India, whose consular district includes the region where Liga disappeared. At the request of the Kerala state government, the Indian Navy and Air Force joined the search for the missing Latvian citizen. The search operation involved NN-32 transport plane, Gemini inflatable boats, underwater sonar, and 5 deep-sea divers. But even this extensive effort did not bring the desired result, and Liga remained missing. The search continued, and by this time, all local residents knew about the missing tourist from Latvia. They supported and sympathized with Andrew and Liga. On April 20, 2018, Liga's phone received the longest-awaited yet most horrific call of her life. A body had been found in the mangrove jungle. She and Andrew drove to the designated spot. The police were waiting for them. For the boat crossing, Liga's heart was pounding like never before. She felt that for the moment she would have to swim the path that Liga had traveled to her demise. On the spot, horror overwhelmed her. Liga saw her sister's clothes. She recognized the shirt and leggings on the body, but the jacket and shoes did not belong to Liga. It remained unclear how, with whom, and why. Liga had gotten to a place that could only be accessed by going through Panader from Samudra Beach. 2 women confirmed that they had witnessed Liga traveling alone into the mangrove forest. But why would a girl who was being treated for depression and already alone take a boat to a remote place in the forest? The body was shifted to the Medical College Hospital, where it underwent an autopsy, which was captured on video camera. The police said they could not confirm the identity of the body until DNA analysis was completed. According to the city police commissioner, the body was badly mutilated with the head lying nearby. Police tentatively identified the dead woman as missing tourist Liga Scromane. In favor of the investigators' conclusions is also the fact that Liga's relatives identified the victim by her hair and clothes. One of the versions put forward by rescue services in India was poisoning. There are poisonous pong-pong trees in the mangrove forest, and she could have accidentally or intentionally eaten their fruit and poisoned herself. Between 1989 and 1999, more than 500 people died from poisoning by its fruits in Kerala alone. However, this theory seemed nonsensical because the person was found hanging upside down, but there was no head. It is obvious that if Liga had been poisoned, her body would have been in a completely different position, and the head would have been in place. The Indian authorities were talking utter nonsense. Based on the information about Liga's complex psychological problems, the investigators also considered the possibility that Liga had voluntarily taken her own life. Liga feared that the police would try to pass off her sister's murder as a voluntary departure from life. Although a rope had been found at the scene, and it could be concluded that the hiker had hanged herself, Liga demanded a separate explanation for the missing head. "Don't tell me it's lost," Liga said sarcastically in yet another appeal on the internet. Breathlessly, Liga and the anxious public waited for the results of the forensic tests. The forensic results were overwhelming. The report stated that there were areas of blood pooling in part of Liga Scromane's brain, as well as bruising in the neck area. The autopsy revealed that the woman had been strangled by several people and was killed in an attempted violent attack. There were external injuries on the body, probably sustained during the struggle. However, the fact of violence could not be definitively confirmed as the body was in the decomposition stage. There were characteristic injuries on the cartilage in her throat, which indicated that someone had forcefully squeezed her throat. The trauma was severe enough to be fatal, according to forensic experts. There were blood clots in her brain, which confirmed strangulation. They also noted that there were bruises on her neck and legs. A total of 9 wounds were recorded on Liga Scromane's body. In view of the above, the police no longer considered the version of voluntary death. According to the autopsy, it was determined that Liga was murdered after resisting or struggling. Ilse breathed a sigh of relief and hoped that the police would soon find her sister's killers. But there were complications as well. As part of the investigation, the police began checking out local drug dealers and card players. In addition, during interviews with local residents, 2 women said that they saw Liga walking alone to the place where her body was later found. But the police said they did not fully trust their words. Meanwhile, Liga's relatives have accused Indian police of incompetence, claiming that if the girl had been searched for immediately, the tragedy could have been avoided. The 33-year-old Latvian tourist is believed to have been grabbed from a nearby beach and transported by boat before being strangled. A special team of investigators has begun looking for those responsible for the crime. About 40 suspects were interviewed. However, arrests were planned to be made a few days later, after the law enforcers had enough evidence. The Indian police conducted an investigation that led to the arrest of 2 men, who were eventually accused of killing Liga Scromane. Police revealed that Liga Scromane was lured by 2 men, who then abused her before dismembering her body. The alleged assailants, who are now in custody, are local dealers in illegal substances. The suspects fully confessed under torture. Both the accused were pimps and were also dealing in illegal substances, police said. The autopsy did not reveal much evidence because Liga's body was badly decomposed. Andrew Jordan filed a petition in Superior Court for a review of the felony murder case. He believed that more people were involved in the woman's murder. In the petition, he pointed out that both defendants later recanted their pleas of guilty to the crime. According to Jordan, the men may have confessed because they were tortured, which as it turns out is a common practice in India. However, the Supreme Court of India denied the murdered woman's common-law husband, Andrew Jordan, a review of the case due to lack of direct evidence. The trial was postponed for 2 months, but Andrew was outraged by this attitude of the authorities. He had earlier accused the Kerala authorities and police of incompetence and attempts to cover up Liga's murder so as not to scare away tourists. Both the suspects' lawyers asked for and got a postponement by law. They have the right to postpone the case once without giving any reason. The more they postponed, the more he was convinced the case was unclean. However, both suspects were in custody. Investigation revealed that 32-year-old Umesh and 28-year-old Ajakumar offered Liga Scromane weed, and when she was drugged they used it and then strangled and decapitated her. It is noted that the 2 men apprehended for the murder of Liga Scromane had previously committed similar crimes on numerous occasions. Both of them worked for a food delivery company in the Kerala capital and earned money as illegal tour guides in their spare time. Umesh and Ujjan have been charged with destruction of evidence, murder, poisoning, kidnapping, and rape. The place where Liga's corpse was found had earlier served as a pleasure ground for Umesh. He used to take men there. 13 criminal cases have been filed against him, including 6 for sexual assault and 1 for attempted murder. Several of Umesh's victims have testified against him. Liga Scromane, along with both men, was seen in the area by several people. They were initially silent, but confessed to everything after the body was found. The detainees confessed to police that they committed the murder while attempting violence. They were apprehended, but had previously claimed that they had only seen Liga Scromane in Kovalam. The men pleaded guilty after repeated interrogations. On December 6, 2022, the court finally sentenced both men to life in prison. Court also recognized that the criminals must pay compensation to Liga Scromane's sister, Ilsa, 65,000 rupees each. We would like to note that there has been a whole series of such crimes in this country recently. Young girls are regularly subjected to violence. The problem of crime in India is very acute. Due to the huge number of sexual acts against minors, the government has introduced the death penalty. It is also worth noting that if the relatives and primarily Liga's sister had not been persistent, had they not involved the press by organizing a press conference and an influential MP, it is obvious that the local police would hardly have seriously investigated the case. At first, a theory was put forward that Liga had allegedly passed away voluntarily, and as it now turns out, this is not the first incident in this very place where Liga was found. After this story, I would like to warn once again all women who are frivolous about the dangers of traveling alone in India. Do not seek spiritual enlightenment in distant, dangerous, and uncharted countries. Take care of yourself. On July 28, 2018, the police arrested Christina, Angelina, and Maria Khachaturyan, but nobody could foresee the wave of public outrage that would follow, dividing public opinion in Russia, reminiscent of the polarization seen in the O.J. Simpson case in the United States. The story of the Khachaturyan sisters and their father, Mikhail, began in Azerbaijan, where Mikhail was born in 1962 into a conservative Armenian family deeply rooted in the Orthodox Church and Caucasus traditions. However, history forced them out of their homeland. In February 1988, the Supreme Soviet of the Nagorno-Karabakh Autonomous Region called for unification with the Armenian SSR, a move that sparked protests and violence in Azerbaijan and Armenia, leading to ethnic clashes in Baku, with Armenians like Mikhail's family fleeing the violence. Mikhail and his family escaped to Moscow, planning to move to America, but family issues delayed their plans, and they stayed in the Russian capital. There, in 1996, he met Aurelia Dunduk, who became his wife and the mother of his children. However, their marriage was far from blissful. Aurelia recounted that Mikhail hit her just before their wedding ceremony, and the abuse continued for 20 years, unabashedly, even in front of others. The Khachaturyans lived in a cramped two-bedroom apartment with Mikhail's mother, sister, and nephew, at times housing up to 10 people as Mikhail decided. To friends and acquaintances, Mikhail appeared devoutly religious, adhering to strict religious norms and superstitions, imposing harsh restrictions on his family, especially on Aurelia, whom he barred from working and restricted from going out. The patriarchal views held by the Khachaturyans dictated that Aurelia, as a dutiful wife, should stoically endure the beatings. In this oppressive environment, the family grew. Aurelia was just 19 when she became pregnant with her first child, Sergei. Christina was born in 1999, followed by Angelina and then Maria in 2001. Sergei first experienced Mikhail's harsh treatment, which continued with severe beatings under the guise of discipline. After Sergei was thrown out at 16, a similar fate befell Aurelia in 2015. Mikhail kicked her out, forbade her from seeing their daughters, and threatened her life if she tried to contact them. Terrified, Aurelia stayed away, knowing all too well her husband's violent nature. Over 20 years, she suffered abuse and sought police help to no avail. In desperation, she even harmed herself with a knife, but still received no aid. With Aurelia and the eldest son gone, Mikhail's violence intensified towards his daughters, burdening them with unbearable tasks, regular beatings, and cruel treatment, including forced intimacy. He demanded their constant availability, summoning them with a bell at any hour to serve him, fetching water, food, or whatever he demanded, asserting his dominance and control to the extreme. Furthermore, he subjected them to sexual abuse whenever he chose. Following these events, in 2016, Christina, one of the sisters, attempted to take her own life but was resuscitated by doctors. He isolated the girls, negatively affecting their schooling. Maria and Angelina, who were in the same grade, were rarely allowed to attend school in recent years because their father forced them to stay home. The sisters later reported that their father constantly threatened them with various weapons and even installed a camera to watch them when he was away from home. In a shocking example of the mental torment they endured, he forced them to eat the family dog's hair. Shockingly, all this happened in the 21st century in plain view of neighbors, teachers, and the girls, friends, and parents who witnessed Mikhail's violent behavior. Yet, except for the school psychologists who tried to discuss their family situation, the community and school staff chose not to intervene, offering no significant support, a stance not uncommon in Russia. In a broader context, in 2017, under pressure from the Russian Orthodox Church and traditionalists, the parliament passed the slapping law, decriminalizing domestic violence and reducing it to an administrative offense. Thus, it was unsurprising when the psychologist's attempt to discuss the matter with Mikhail was cut short by threats as he guarded his family affairs closely. By 2018, the Khachaturyan sisters were virtually imprisoned in their home, suffering their father's physical and psychological abuse, a reality unknown to their mother and brother, but easily deduced from their prior experiences. Tragically, these abuses were normalized by their grandmother and the paternal family, who believed Mikhail was protecting them to ensure they lived honorably. On the night of July 27, 2018, after returning home from medical treatment, 57-year-old Mikhail became enraged over extra expenses and the disorder in the apartment, which he had demanded his daughters manage. He called them one by one, scolded them in a room, and sprayed pepper spray in their faces, causing Christina to faint from a severe asthma attack. After punishing his daughters, Mikhail went to sleep on a couch. At that moment, Angelina and Maria decided they could no longer endure the abuse. One night while their father slept on the couch, 18-year-old Angelina quietly approached and struck him in the head with a hammer. Then, 17-year-old Maria wounded him with a sharp household object he often used to threaten them. Despite their efforts, Mikhail, strong as he was, woke up and tried to fend them off and escape the apartment. Hearing the commotion, 19-year-old Christina, the eldest sister, grabbed the same can of pepper spray her father had used and sprayed him in the face to stop him from catching one of her sisters. Amid the family struggle, Angelina took the sharp weapon from Maria and dealt the final blow to their father, who had tormented them for so long. Minutes later, the three girls made cuts on their arms to simulate defensive wounds as if their father had attacked them. They then called the police and an ambulance. Upon arrival at the apartment building, Moscow authorities found Mikhail's body with the autopsy report noting multiple stab wounds, including cuts on the chest and neck. During the search of the premises, police confiscated numerous weapons owned by Mikhail, including a knife, hammer, crossbow, rifle, 2 air pistols, a traumatic weapon, 16 bullets, and 16 darts. Traumatic weapons, firing rubber or pepper projectiles, cause intense pain but are not usually fatal. The next day, Christina, Angelina, and Maria were arrested as the primary suspects in their father's death. During questioning, they confessed to the crime, citing years of physical, moral, and sexual abuse by Mikhail as their motive, leading investigators to note the hostile personal relationship and prolonged moral suffering caused by the father. On July 29th, the trio was charged with murder without aggravating circumstances. The sisters, Christina, Angelina, and Maria Khachaturyan, labeled their father a sex-addicted villain who systematically subjected them to cruel and inhuman treatment and used them as slaves for years. During the investigation, they revealed that he had sexually assaulted all 3 sisters and forced them into incestuous relations against their will. Testimonies from friends and family corroborated over 10 incidents of sexual violence, and a medical examination confirmed the sisters had suffered sexual abuse. Maria, the youngest sister, was declared mentally unstable at the time of the incident and sent for compulsory medical treatment. On July 30th, 2018, a Moscow court held a pretrial detention hearing, extending their detention by 72 hours. During the proceedings, the charges were escalated from simple murder to murder under the Russian Penal Code, indicating a harsher expected sentence. On July 31st, representatives from Moscow's Public Monitoring Commission visited the sisters, who reported that their legal rights had been violated post-arrest. They were not informed of their rights, nor provided with legal counsel during questioning. In early August, the investigation proceeded with weapon examinations and interviews with the sisters' acquaintances. Surveillance footage from the Khachaturyan home was also reviewed, and a crime scene reenactment was conducted. Prosecutors concluded that the sisters acted in concert with the youngest, Maria, striking their father at least 35 times with a sharp object. However, their defense lawyers argued for their innocence, emphasizing the constant life-threatening environment imposed by their father, which left them isolated and desperate. On August 2nd, Moscow's court extended their pretrial detention by 2 months, For days later, the Central Office of the Investigative Committee took over the case. Russia's Human Rights Commissioner deemed the judicial decision excessive, prompting an appeal from the defense. While in detention, the sisters had the opportunity to study and speak with a psychologist, providing them with support previously denied by their father. By mid-August, the investigation acknowledged Mikhail's immoral actions and confirmed the psychological and sexual abuse. In early September, a mental health examination found the youngest sister unaware of her actions, leading to her transfer to the prison's psychiatric ward. The assessment revealed that the other two sisters were mentally healthy, yet they were diagnosed with battered woman syndrome. Despite an initial rejection of house arrest by the court, Sisters Maria and Angelina were released from detention by the end of September with a 3-month ban on using the internet and contacting certain relatives in the media. Russian media offered varying accounts of the events, but unanimously reported the sisters had endured long-term physical and sexual abuse by their father. As the court proceedings progressed, the public learned through journalists about the sisters' lifelong suffering. Media outlets released audio recordings and correspondence of the girls, evidencing the extensive violence they endured from Mikhail. Their defense strategy refuted the notion of premeditated conspiracy, focusing instead on the spontaneous nature of their actions, driven by the emotional turmoil they faced. Text from Mikhail's phone, shared by their lawyer on social media, showed him threatening their lives and forcing them into sexual acts, including a specific threat in April 2018 to beat and kill them, accusing them of sexual relations with a friend, and vowing they would die dishonorably. Transcripts from the interrogations painted a grim picture of long-standing mental, physical, and sexual abuse. A circulated video showed Mikhail yelling at and hitting his daughters, blaming them for the apartment's disarray, footage he recorded himself. Simultaneously, the Public Oversight Commission investigated local child protection agencies, following claims from the sisters' lawyers that these organizations failed to act on reports about Mikhail from the girls' school teachers. Although Mikhail had been repeatedly reported to the police, they denied receiving such reports posthumously, attributed by the girl's mother, Aurelia, to Mikhail's connections with local police officials, a claim later corroborated by investigative journalists. Activists noted that women risk severe prison sentences for defending themselves against abusers. In the sisters' case, lawyers and activists argued they were compelled to act in self-defense. In a country where penalties for domestic violence have been softened in recent years, victims are often left with no choice but to defend themselves. However, not everyone believed in the innocence of the young sisters, facing significant skepticism within the conservative sectors of Russian society. The teenagers lacked support from their own family, with several relatives of Mikhail defending him, calling the sisters liars and suggesting the alleged domestic violence was merely a reaction to their provocations. These relatives claimed the sisters had financial motives for killing him. Despite the sisters renouncing their father's inheritance, their grandmother revoked Christina's apartment registration. Their cousin claimed they lied about the beatings to tarnish their father's reputation. An aunt, sister of Michael, asserted there was no evidence of sexual violence, citing medical tests supposedly proving 2 of the sisters were virgins, and insinuated that the third sister had a secret boyfriend. The Khachaturyan sisters' case sparked widespread public outcry and was extensively debated on state television. In January, the prosecutor's office confirmed the defense's allegations of the sisters suffering constant beatings, humiliations, threats, and physical and sexual violence, leading to a defensive response. Prosecutors then instructed the investigative committee to reclassify the case from premeditated murder to necessary self-defense. One of the lawyers told the state news agency that this reclassification would likely end the criminal investigation against the sisters, who faced up to 20 years in prison for premeditated murder. However, in a surprising twist, the prosecutor who initially recommended downgrading the case confirmed in March that premeditated murder charges would be pressed against the sisters with no explanation for the drastic change. On June 14, 2019, the charges were elevated to premeditated murder with penalties ranging from 8 to 20 years. The prosecution cited the father's violent actions as the murder motive. In response, the lawyers appealed to the head of the investigative committee, insisting on recognizing self-defense as the primary motive. Investigators sought to extend the sisters' ban on internet use, communication with relatives, and media statements for another month. This ban was extended until July 28 and further prolonged. The case, widely covered by the media, led to large-scale public protests and support demonstrations in Moscow, St. Petersburg, and other cities, with activists demanding the reclassification of the case. The sisters gained support from celebrities and journalists, highlighting the significant public backing and outcry against the perceived injustices they faced. However, the march supporting the sisters faced opposition from male activists of a conservative Russian organization, which viewed the young women as cold-blooded criminals. 4 individuals were detained for causing disturbances, 3 of whom were men from this conservative group. Critics, meanwhile, pointed to the sisters' seemingly carefree images on social media. Initially, public pressure seemed to influence the case, leading to an early defense breakthrough on July 11th, with the investigative committee planning to posthumously charge Mikhail for torture, sexual violence, and forced sexual acts. However, by the end of 2019, despite evidence of abuse by their father, the investigative committee announced premeditated murder charges, arguing the attack was planned, evidenced by the sisters coordinating the assault while their father slept and allegedly preparing the weapon beforehand. The sisters countered that Russian penal law allows for self-defense not only during immediate aggression, but also in ongoing crimes. A 2019 survey found that 47% of Russian women and 33% of Russian men felt the sisters' actions were justified. In early 2020, the Deputy Prosecutor General refused to sign the accusation against the sisters, suggesting the charges should be reclassified as necessary self-defense. Although investigators objected, the General Prosecutor ordered further psychological and psychiatric assessments. By May 13th, additional investigations were completed and the murder charges were re-evaluated. In July, the General Prosecutor approved the indictment, leading to the trial's commencement in Moscow on July 31st. The older sisters, Christina and Angelina, were tried together, while Maria, a minor at the time of the crime, was charged after turning 18. At the trial's start, the prosecution sought a communication ban on the accused for at least 6 months. The sisters were restricted from accessing the internet, speaking to the press, contacting trial participants, and joining public events like demonstrations supporting them. In August 2020, the Moscow City Court approved a jury trial for Christina and Angelina's case. Maria was declared unfit for trial with an expectation that prosecutors would seek medical treatment for her in a separate proceeding. Amid this complex legal situation with 3 accused, 2 separate trials, and conflicting legal opinions, a significant twist occurred. On December 4, 2020, Moscow's court ruled the investigators' refusal to initiate criminal proceedings against Mikhail Khachaturyan illegal, mandating the start of legal actions against him. Following this, in early February 2021, the Moscow City Court sent Angelina and Christina's case back to the prosecutors pending legal assessment of their father's actions. In March, a posthumous case against Mikhail opened in Moscow's district court for charges of sexual aggression, coercion, and torment, recognizing the sisters as victims. The investigation found Mikhail had manipulated people through intimidation, violence, cruelty, and humiliation, engaging in physical and sexual violence, and exhibiting a disorder or perversion. He also distributed explicit, intimate material of his daughters. However, the lawyer representing the deceased challenged the sexual assault charges, citing a lack of biological evidence and suggesting the daughters could have sent the explicit material from their father's phone, arguing that it was the investigators' responsibility to prove Mikhail sent the videos. By May 29, 2022, the investigation against Mikhail concluded, accusing him of sexual violence, assault, and distributing explicit material. The trial unearthed horrifying details, including forcing his daughters to dig their own graves, highlighting the severe physical and mental harm inflicted on them. This development paved the way for the potential exoneration of the 3 sisters. After a lengthy legal battle, they were finally recognized as victims, offering them a glimmer of hope for regaining their freedom as their crime might be reclassified as self-defense. However, a definitive ruling in Mikhail's trial has yet to be issued. As of April 2024, Christina and Angelina were still under house arrest, awaiting the conclusion of their father's trial. Women's rights advocates argue that the sisters should receive psychological rehabilitation rather than prison sentences. The possibility of dropping charges against all sisters has emerged following a new psychiatric evaluation, which revealed that all of them were suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder at the time of the incident. While the Khachaturyan sisters await their verdict, their defense lawyers hope their case will be reconsidered by the judiciary and set a precedent in Russian law for the self-defense of abuse victims. The case has sparked significant public outcry and has been a hot topic on Russian television for months, focusing on the abusive father's death and the Moscow police's criticized role for not acting against Mikhail following his ex-wife's reports of physical violence. It was exposed that law enforcement often treats domestic violence as a family issue, providing little to no support to the victims. The case of Ariel Castro, the monster from Cleveland and his captives, is a striking example of brutal criminals hiding behind the facade of normalcy. Maniacs like Castro often appear as good, law-abiding citizens, falling neighbors, friends, colleagues, and even close relatives who were unaware of their double lives. Unlike many, Ariel Castro was never a model family man or worker. He was a tyrant to his wife who chose to stay silent about her suffering. Thus, people around them sincerely viewed Ariel as a good-natured, friendly, and helpful neighbor. This perception shattered in the spring of 2013 when the world learned about the Cleveland monster, who had kept 3 girls captive in his home for 10 years. The revelations shook the country, particularly shocking the local residents, as the missing girls were from the same neighborhood and trusted Castro enough to accept rides from him. Remarkably, Castro even participated in the search efforts for his victims, becoming a volunteer, yet no one suspected him. Let's delve into how this criminal managed to stay hidden in plain sight, continue kidnapping girls, and evade detection. Ariel Rodriguez Castro was born on July 10, 1960 in Yauco, Puerto Rico, as the third of 4 children in a poor family. His parents, Liliana Rodriguez and Pedro Castro, constantly fought and eventually divorced before Ariel started school, leaving his mother to care for him and his siblings, O'Neill, Pedro, and Benita. Struggling to make ends meet, the family moved to Reading, Pennsylvania, in southeastern USA. However, they soon moved to the neighboring state of Ohio, finally settling in Cleveland, a city that at the time welcomed migrants from Latin American countries. Pedro Castro also moved to Cleveland with his new wife and their joint children, settling nearby so the children from his first marriage could freely communicate with their father, which Liliana never forbade. Although their father willingly contacted his older children, he never helped them financially. Liliana later remarried, giving Ariel 4 more siblings. Ariel attended Lincoln West High School in Cleveland, graduating in 1978. He studied music and regularly attended church with his family, presenting as a model Christian, but was a domestic tyrant. In his teens, Ariel met a girl named Grimilda Figueroa, whose family lived across the street. They attended the same school, quickly became friends, and later developed a romantic relationship. For a long time, they lived with their parents because they couldn't afford their own place. In the early 1990s, after saving enough money, the couple moved into a house on Seymour Avenue in southwest Cleveland. This 2-story building, erected in 1890 and later reconstructed, had 4 bedrooms, a dining room, 1 bathroom, and a large unfinished basement. According to Grimilda's sister Alida Caballo, Grimilda complained that her life became a nightmare after moving into the new house. Ariel regularly abused her, both physically and emotionally. Grimilda believed things would improve after marriage and children, but the abuse worsened. She hid bruises and abrasions under her clothes, blaming visible injuries on clumsiness. In 1993, Ariel beat Grimilda so severely that she needed medical attention. Grimilda suffered fractured ribs, a broken nose, and broken arms after being pushed down the stairs by her husband. Despite her severe injuries, she refused to file a police report and the incident was hushed up. After receiving medical attention, she returned to her abusive husband. Ariel remained quiet for a while, fearing police attention, but soon realized he could get away with it and continued to beat his wife. In the mid-1990s, he inflicted a head injury that caused a blood clot and an inoperable tumor. Ariel was arrested, but released a day later, as Grimilda did not press charges, and even requested his release. By the late 1990s, Grimilda, tired of the abuse, filed for divorce, secured custody of their 4 children, Arlene, Antonio, Angie, and Amelia, and moved out. Her nightmare continued, as her ex-husband pursued, blackmailed, and threatened her. Grimilda sought a restraining order which was issued 3 times but revoked each time. She passed away in late April 2012 from complications related to the brain tumor. By then, her children were grown and independent, but maintained a warm relationship with their father. In the early 2000s, lived alone on Seymour Avenue, worked as a school bus driver, played guitar at city festivals, and was known as a good-natured, hospitable neighbor. Nevertheless, there were oddities in Castro's behavior that went unnoticed. For instance, he was prosecuted several times for traffic violations, including speeding and making dangerous U-turns while driving a school bus. These infractions led to fines and a suspension, culminating in his firing in early 2013 after a maneuver endangered his passengers. Ariel frequently changed musical groups due to tardiness and disrupting rehearsals and concerts. After separating from his wife, he never invited anyone inside his house, though he regularly hosted backyard barbecues. His strangeness did not raise concern. He was seen as eccentric but harmless. No one could have guessed the danger behind his friendly facade. His first victim was Michelle Knight. On August 23, 2002, Ariel decided to kidnap and imprison her. Michelle, born on April 23, 1981, in Cleveland, had a troubled youth, often ran away from home, and had a police record. She became a mother early, but lost custody of her son, who was in a shelter. On that fateful day, she was on her way to court to regain custody of her 2-year-old. Ariel, whom she knew as her neighbor and a school bus driver, offered her a ride. He mentioned having puppies at home and invited her to help find them homes. Trusting him, Michelle agreed, but upon entering his house, the kind man turned into a monster. He severely beat and assaulted her, then chained her in the basement. For days, he starved her, deprived her of water, and repeatedly abused her. She was unable to move and begged for her release, promising silence. When Michelle's mother reported her missing, the police did not prioritize her case. Years later, after the terrible truth came to light, police officers admitted that Michelle Knight's case was not a priority, and limited resources were allocated to the investigation. Firstly, Knight was an adult. Secondly, she had previously left home multiple times. Thirdly, she had legal issues. Most importantly, authorities believed she was avoiding court proceedings related to her son's custody. Michelle's relatives tried to find her through their own efforts, involving neighbors, friends, and anyone concerned. At one point, Ariel Castro even helped post flyers with Michelle's photo around the city, all while she remained a prisoner in his basement. The second victim was Amanda Berry. Castro, convinced he was beyond suspicion, decided to kidnap again in spring 2003. Amanda, born on April 22, 1986, was about to celebrate her 17th birthday, but mysteriously disappeared on April 21, 2003. She was working as a waitress and called home after her shift, promising to be there soon. However, Amanda never arrived, and neither did she appear in the following days, months, or years. As Amanda left the restaurant and headed for the bus stop, Ariel drove up with a seemingly harmless offer of a ride home. Since she had been in the same class as his son for several years, she trusted him and accepted. On the way, he deceived her into entering his house, where he brutally beat her and dragged her to the basement, where Michelle had been held captive for months. Amanda faced the same horrific fate, beaten and starved for several days. This time, he chose 14-year-old Georgina Linda Jesus, who was in the same class as his daughter Arlene and was her best friend. On April 2, 2004, 2 girls walked out of school together, talked for a while, and then each went to their homes. On the corner of West 105th Street, Gina met Ariel, who promised to take her home. She knew him since childhood, was her best friend's father, so without hesitation she got into his car immediately. Even though it was daytime and no one witnessed the kidnapping, the streets were empty. When it became known that Gina was missing, there was no warning to Amber, making her parents angry. The story aired on the Fox television show, America's Most Wanted, rerun 2 more times in 2005 and 2006. The disappearance was linked to Amanda's kidnapping a year earlier in September. But Castro remained unsuspected. Despite this, he voluntarily participated in the search for the missing girls. He treated Gina like the other victims, keeping them imprisoned in his home. Although a passerby saw a middle-aged Hispanic man and a sketch resembling Castro was drawn, he was never a suspect. For over 10 years, he regularly beat, abused, and starved his victims to mentally break them down, punishing any disobedience or escape attempts to prevent thoughts of death. Running away. Michelle, the first and oldest victim, suffered the most, undergoing public beatings to intimidate others. Finally, he moved them from the dark basement to a second-floor room with a view of the backyard. Knight recalls that she became pregnant by her abuser at least 5 times during her incarceration. However, each time it became obvious Ariel terminated the pregnancy in the most brutal way. He starved the girl and kicked her in the stomach until she miscarried. After one of these tortures, she almost died due to severe bleeding. But on September 3, 2013, just a month after he began serving his life sentence, the Cleveland monster was found hanging from a sheet in his prison cell. All attempts to revive him were unsuccessful. He was 53 years old at the time of his death. Michelle Knight, after her release, preferred to change her name and place of residence. She did not give interviews, but a few years later published a book in which she recounted all the horrors she had experienced in the Castro home. Her child was adopted after his mother disappeared. The woman later tracked down his adoptive parents, but it is not known whether she was able to establish contact with her now adult son. Barry and Jesus received diplomas from John Marshall High School in 2015 because they never had time to graduate. Gina later volunteered on the Amber Alert Committee, and Barry joined Fox affiliate WJW in Cleveland in 2017, where she hosts a missing persons column. Castro family members disowned Ariel, condemned his actions, and apologized to his victims and their families. The perpetrator's eldest daughter, Amelia, is now serving a 25-year prison sentence for assault and attempting to take a man's life. His youngest daughter, Arlene, apologized to former best friend Gina for the way her father treated her. Castro's son, Antonio, said he had been to his father's house and saw that some rooms were locked and inaccessible, but his parent explained it was because he was saving money on heating. In 2018, Michelle published a book titled Life After Darkness, Finding Healing and Happiness After the Cleveland Kidnappings. De Jesus also wrote a book of memoirs titled Hope, a memoir of survival in Cleveland. There have also been numerous documentary projects and 2 feature films about those horrific events. Prisoners of Cleveland, which was released in 2015, and Kidnapped in Cleveland, which was released in 2021. Ariel Castro's case is one of the most horrifying cases in American criminal history. Castro was convicted of kidnapping, holding, and sexually abusing 3 women for more than a decade in his home. Castro kidnapped Amanda Berry, Gina De Jesus, and Michelle Knight at his home in the Tremont section of Cleveland. He kept them in terrible conditions, imprisoned in small rooms and subjected to physical and mental torture. Finally, Barry managed to escape captivity by banging on the door and calling for help. She and the baby girl she gave birth to in captivity were rescued, along with DeJesus and Knight. When the police arrived, they discovered the brutal tragedy that Castro had caused. Castro was later arrested and convicted of a series of crimes, including rape, illegal arrest, and unresolved murder. He received a sentence of life in prison plus 1,000 years. However, he committed suicide in prison in September 2013, just 2 months after his arrest. This case caused a stir and sparked special interest in the issue of domestic violence and human rights protection. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of unsolved mysteries. Cold cases not only challenge our understanding of the past, but also ignite our curiosity and determination for answers. Remember to subscribe to stay updated on our latest investigations. And if you have any information regarding the cases we've covered, don't hesitate to reach out. Together, we can shed light on the shadows of the past and bring closure to those who seek it. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never stop seeking the truth.